Hello there, and welcome to Sweet Shot of Time. I'm your host, Steve Barnes, and today the discussion is 2015's punk rock film Green Room. This is actually a one of my stories discussion. Lindsey led the way on this one. It was her idea, and she led the podcast, but it feels just like a Sweet Shot of Time, so here we are. Her guest was myself and Scott Spier, who is in head of monsterriff.com and The Clean and Sober Stoner, which you can find at cleanandsoberstoner.com and on YouTube. We all discussed Green Room, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that today the release date is June 20th, which is the same day that Lindsey Dunn and myself, Introvoid, are releasing our first original single with vocals together. It's called Thus the World is Created. It's available everywhere right now, and I'm using it for the intro to the show, so that's the vibe of the song right there. So please check that out. Here we go with the discussion. Enjoy the show today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsey Dunn, here for One of My Stories, a podcast about the stories shaping me. Today, I'm joined by two co-hosts to continue our music movie series. Joining me in the studio is Odin himself, my main roadie. He's never using that house kit. You know him as Introvoid. Ahoy, Steve.
Ahoy, Lindsey. How's it going?
I'm good.
This movie is an appropriate ahoy because it's filmed in Portland, Oregon. So they wouldn't name a city Portland without like a bunch of ports and then boats come into ports. So ahoy there, Lindsey.
Ahoy. And a new storyteller, a fellow Tar Heel, and I'll siphon gas for him any day of the week. But he keeps wanting to introduce me to his cousin Daniel. He's on Team Doom. You know him as Clean and Sober Stoner. Ahoy, Scott.
Welcome. It's good to be here, mateys. That's my Amon Amarth, since we're doing Nazis. And so it's my Amon Amarth, which is very anti-Nazi.
Right.
So
right.
Feel good that the blackened doom power metal of Amon Amarth will protect you.
With Odin on our side. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
I do feel a little underdressed, though, because I'm the only one not wearing a black shirt right now. So welcome to both of you. Scott, as I said, you're new to One of My Stories. Please give us a little introduction to you and what you do.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Scott. I'm the editor-in-chief of cleanandsoberstoner.com, where we cover the heavy underground, mostly stoner and doom. I'm also the new editor-in-chief and owner of monsterriff.com, which is huge. I mean, they had articles that beat Rolling Stone and Vice, on Google rankings. So we acquired them officially last week. So we're doing that. And then both of those get channeled on my YouTube channel, which again, Clean and Sober Stoner 1. Yeah, so it's YouTube at Clean and Sober Stoner 1. So I'm into rock, man.
Heck yeah. That's my company right there.
So today we are talking about the 215. What's wrong with me? 2015 punk rock horror or thriller feature Green Room, directed by Jeremy Saulnier, starring Anton Yelkin, Imogen Poots, and Big Bad Patrick Stewart.
Oops.
In this movie, a punk band called the Ain't Rights diverts from their planned tour to make up for their dwindling cash pool. Their matinee show for a crowd of skinheads goes off without a hitch, except for a few boos and some spits at the stage. All seems kosher until one of them discovers a dead body. Now trapped inside the green room without means to get help, this group of musicians has to use their wits and ability to improvise to outlast the boots and braces in the Pacific Northwest. So let's start with why we picked this movie. I know why I picked the movie, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I know that when we threw out some ideas for you, Scott, you expressed interest with this movie over other films we suggested. So what interested you about this movie?
Well, I felt like it was low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's dealing with rock or punk rock. It was an easier segue. Like, I'm less of a square peg. Although, really, honestly, Whiplash was my preferred, but I knew that this movie meant so much to you, Lindsey, and I'm so grateful that, really, when you guys were on the channel, it's one of the highest performing over time. I'm still getting like people are watching the whole thing, and it was, so I owed you one, man. So Green Room.
We're engaging. Yeah. Heck yeah, man. Cool.
What about you, Steve? You agreed to do
Sure.
the movie. So were you real pumped to do this one, or just coming along with my enthusiasm?
Well, yeah, I mean, your enthusiasm absolutely led the way. But, I've seen this movie. I saw this movie when it first came out. So I can speak as to why I saw this movie when it came out. It's because, I like punk rock and I like hardcore. I knew that this was focused around that. I knew Aaliyah Shawkat was playing a lead role, and I knew that she was going to be actually playing guitar in this movie. So that was like in interviews before the movie came out. It's like, maybe from Arrested Development is playing guitar in a punk band, and she's going to be in a movie in this summer. And, I was immediately on board. I've always loved her, like, deeply. Like, she's my girlfriend type of thing. Like, she doesn't realize it yet, but I'm really a big fan of her. And she was playing my guitar in SG Gibson. So I was really into that. And Eric Edelstein was a big draw for me too, because I'm a fan of his stuff. He's the guy who played like the really big Nazi that was in the room with them. They had to grapple later. He's a really fun guy. I've heard him on podcasts. He's a vegan type. I'm a vegetarian. That's what drew me to the movie, was those actors and just knowing it was a punk rock movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had seen the movie for the first time last year. It came out in 2015. So obviously before I loved films, but before I was seriously doing a film critic. And it was still sort of in my period where I wasn't doing as much. Came out also when I wasn't watching as much horror. And that's kind of changed in the last few years, that I'm doing more darker stuff. So I think when I saw it for the first time, I was just kind of blown away by the production and the fact that it was this very taut, in some ways, minimalist film that is very simple. It doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles or mess with a lot of special effects, but it's just really great acting in sort of one location or a limited location. I always like those kinds of movies that kind of keep things trapped in a small space. And I just loved it. And I looked at my review last night. I hadn't seen it in a while, but it was when I first wrote it. I said that this was the most heavy metal movie since Mandy. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Mandy with Nicolas Cage.
Oh, yes.
No.
But I think, but that movie for me, I was like, it's so entwined with like heavy metal music for me, and has like that feel of you're watching this and the movie itself is kind of metal. So watching this movie, I had the same feeling. It felt so visceral and so entwined with the score and the music and just the scene of being in a band and what that means and could look like. It's like, this is what I imagine in my head if I was in a band, life would be like. And maybe we'll talk about like if it was realistically done or not. I think it's one of our topics. But
Sure.
It was, for me, one of these movies that once you turn it on, you just got lost in it.
I hear that. I enjoyed like the first half, like with a lot of movies that we watch and that are these type of movies. I'm a bigger fan of the first half than the second half. So I enjoyed rewatching the first half of it. But then when it started getting into the horror territory, it's not my speed. So it's like a half and a half kind of movie for me.
Mm-hmm. So Scott, had you seen the movie before we did the podcast?
I watched it when it first came on to streaming. So that would be around 2016-ish.
2015. Yep. No, it's streaming 2016. That's right.
Yeah, it was somewhere around there. Yeah. I know it was before the pandemic. Yeah, I had seen it, and there are a lot of things that I think are really good about the movie. But there are things, and we'll get to it, that there are things that prevent it from being great for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And not to be Debbie Downer, but...
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just have some production notes. So we're going to go over some of these details, and then I will ask for you guys' overall reaction of the movie. So, director and writer Jeremy Saulnier, his first movie is The Murder Party, and his next movie was Blue Ruin.
Yay.
In Blue Ruin, the main actor is Macon Blair. And Macon Blair seems to be one of Saulnier's muses, along with Brent Worsner, who played the character of Worm. They've been in several of his movies. So he's in the same lines as many of the directors that Steve and I seem to talk about. They tend to get attached to certain actors. So it was interesting for me to discover he likes working with Macon Blair, who plays Gabriel in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
In 2018, he went on to direct Hold the Dark, which was written by Macon Blair. I haven't seen Murder Party, I haven't seen Blue Ruin, and I haven't seen Hold the Dark. Have you guys seen any of those films, and do you like them?
I haven't.
Blue Ruin, yes. And the guy who plays Gabriel in this movie, I immediately recognize him from Blue Ruin. Also a really disturbing movie at times. A very watchable movie that has elements of Disturbia to it. But a very great movie, like with the same kind of tone and pace to this one.
Mm-hmm. So Saulnier and Macon Blair have been best friends for years. Blair is the lead in Blue Ruin, but the director didn't see him as belonging in the skinhead world. For a while, Macon Blair was supposed to be the lead character, which I guess, I don't know if he means Patrick Stewart or if he means Anton Yelchin, but Blair auditioned just like everyone else and ultimately convinced Saulnier he could be this character of Gabe the neo-Nazi. And Saulnier said, "My best buddy was not given a handout. He had to go get Nazi tattoos from the internet, some temporary tattoos, and the vendor initially refused his request, so he had to prove he was auditioning for my movie to get the tattoos." So he was dedicated. Saulnier was terrified after the success of Blue Ruin and wanted to make Green Room next before he got too famous and wouldn't be allowed to make violent movies anymore. And he was inspired by the movie Straw Dogs. He himself was a singer in a punk hardcore band, and he wanted to make a movie. In this case, he wanted not to make it big and bad, but a quiet menace, which of course we're kind of into. So Patrick Stewart, he was really scared when he wrote the screenplay and had to lock himself in the bathroom and pour himself a scotch.
Of course.
But he was very excited about playing Darcy Banker and really wanted to play that role. This is one of Anton Yelchin's, of course, final films. The paintball story he tells is a real story from Jeremy's life. And another interesting tidbit about Patrick Stewart is that he was, when we first encounter him, we see the back of his head. Then we see he's like on the outside of a car. So again, not that close. Mm-hmm. And Saulnier continues to he uses distance a lot as to kind of keep the characters at a distance. Then the next thing we see him, he's through the door talking to the band. And his scenes were shot with a camera on both sides of the door, but they knew that they weren't going to really probably use the camera footage on Patrick Stewart's side of the door because they wanted his character to trump Patrick Stewart. They wanted his character to be more outstanding than Stewart. And I thought that was really effective. Some of the movies that inspired him were The Shining, I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker, and Commando, Conan the Barbarian, and Assault on Precinct 13. So those are my production notes. Do you guys have anything you brought to the table? Not about music yet, but just like filmmaking trivia.
Those are great production notes.
Oh, okay.
Like, I like the movie better now. Like, my rating for it just went up a couple notches, knowing a little bit, especially how they're framing and what they did with Patrick Stewart to make his character be a little bit different than, Captain Picard. I think that's smart. Or for the younger people out there, Professor X.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
What were you going to say, Steve?
Yeah, I was going to go into some of the stuff I knew about this film. Filmed in Portland, Oregon, and based in Portland, Oregon as well. And that was intentional because, Portland, Oregon, of course, has a large liberal population and then also a large neo-Nazi population. So that was, just picked for that reason. He enlisted the guy Hutch Harris from the Thermals, a punk band, to teach these four actors, how to play. Was it okay if I go into the music production notes now, Lindsey?
This is what I know. The tracks were recorded separately from the stage performances. So some of the performances the band was performing the actual Ain't Rights, but they did record some of the songs apart so that the singing would be stronger. Anton and Aaliyah Shawkat knew how to play their instruments already, but Callum Turner and Joe Cole, Callum Turner, of course, the guy with the green hair, and Joe Cole, the drummer, they learned to do their instruments for the movie. And Saulnier used to play in the band No Turn on Fred. And as Steve mentioned, he asked Hutch Harris to teach the actors the instruments they'd be performing. The soundtrack is made of heavy metal artists and not white nationalist bands because they did not want to support any white supremacy bands and give them money to be able to use their music or to promote them in any way. So that's all I have. So Steve, over to you.
Yeah, and speaking of the Nazi bands, the Nazi band Cowcatcher that is featured in the movie later on, that music is actually by a band called Corpus Rodus, who's actually walking away from this movie. My favorite song and band from this movie, because I like that death metal sound. But as you said, definitely not neo-Nazi stuff. So yeah, he taught these guys their instruments. The drummer, he said, he being Hutch Harris, he said that Hutch and the singer kind of showed up later on, and the singer immediately jumped in there. He said he didn't have a whole lot, the interview that I read, he didn't have a whole lot of input or communication with the drummer. He said that the drummer just kind of did his thing and was very chaotic, which was pretty much exactly what they wanted. So he just kind of let that lie as it was, which I thought was kind of funny that he was like, yeah, I got along with all these guys, but the drummer guy, I never talked to him. You know, they used some not real life, but real music and real bands in this film, such as Fear, Poison Idea, who's also mentioned in this film, Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains. You hear CCR at the end. We hear Slayer and Napalm Death. But all the songs about the Ain't Rights, as you said, were actually on film, performed by the Ain't Rights. Did a great job. And then they did their studio versions, which I was listening to before we came on here. They have a Spotify. Well, you know, it's the movie soundtrack. It's on Spotify. I don't know why I'm plugging Spotify. It's the soundtrack for the film Green Room. Check it out. There's bands called Patsy's Rat, Hotstetter, Missionary Position, and Syphilic Lust. And so they didn't write any original songs for the Ain't Rights. They just used like these band songs, and the Ain't Rights just learned like a huge set of, you know, punk songs to perform. Yeah, I don't think I have any other specific music notes for that. Yeah, Lindsey, back to you.
Scott, do you want to chime in with any notes about the music and how you think it worked or didn't work for the movie?
I do, but I don't know if you want that because I think what I said when we were emailing back and forth is I thought it starts out so strong to the detriment of the movie. And did you want me to address that part now or wait on that a bit?
Well, I wanted to kind of wait on that. Right now we're talking about the music. So was there anything you wanted to contribute about that aspect? Or when you said realism, did you mean the music?
The music and the bands and the culture that they show in the first half hour is really, I've had an ambivalent relationship to punk. I think the only punk band I've ever bought in my life is X out of Los Angeles with Exene Cervenka and John Doe, who's been in a lot of movies. I am very much not a punk guy at all. That there are a lot of reasons for that I don't like the music. So I knew the names and all that, but I really don't have much comment on the music. I'm surprised, though, that they use so much heavy metal in the soundtrack instead of hardcore or punk. I am a little curious on those decisions. Like, I had an opinion of this movie before we started. Now I'm like, now I'm going to have to watch it again. And I only rented it. I didn't buy it.
Yeah, what I read was that Jeremy Saulnier wanted to make the overall sound or type of music scene that they were using. He mentioned Motorhead, which I don't know a lot about the band Motorhead. Just I know the name of the band and that. But that was kind of, maybe that is part of him trying to avoid actually using white supremacy bands. I'm not sure. Like I said, I didn't do too much. But I do want to talk just a little bit about, as far as music goes, of course, there's the songs that they performed and the songs they borrowed and had them reperform. But then there's actually the score itself, which I always like to mention who composed the score. Yep. And in this case, it's Brooke Blair and Will Blair. And
I love it.
I didn't have too much time to really dive into the score itself. But one moment that I feel is so notable and is probably the moment where I really fell in love with the movie watching it the first time is their performance in the bar when they go from the Nazi punk song. And, you know, of course, them performing that song is a complete act of rebellion towards the whole establishment and everybody in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're making a statement up front about who they are. And this the whole transition of him going, that was a cover. And then he goes into this other song, Coronary. And from there, they shift the music, transitions into this beautiful, ethereal, dreamlike thing. And Jeremy Saulnier, I was watching part of his commentary. And he mentioned he kind of hates the trope of slow-mo in movies. And he was like, this was my exception. I used it here. But I think it works so well in that instance. And I love that segment because it just helps you to kind of feel like you're in the room with that group and feel the experience of live music, even though you probably don't want to be in a band with a bunch of skinheads, but be in the room with a bunch of skinheads, but just the feel of the concert, the way they do that is so visceral. And of course, the Blair score complements the imagery perfectly. So I just wanted to pull that out as being especially notable.
I love it. Like I've always wanted to score a film, and that's pretty much exactly how I want to do it. Not with a bunch of songs that I've written for Introvoid, but with a bunch of soundscapes. I absolutely love that scene too. Actually, I wrote a little something about that scene, Lindsey. I wrote a little paragraph here. I think now is an appropriate time to talk about that because we're talking about that one scene. And I think that is like an important part of that movie because their problems didn't stem from them being anti-Nazi. Their problem only simply stemmed from them going back in a random occurrence. So I think what they did there by planting their flag on the stage and saying, this is what we are, it was a smart move. And I think that the Nazis respected that of them. And this is what I wrote. I wrote, the band represents chaos, the skins are order. Foreshadowing ensues at the moment chaos overshadows order, when the Ain't Rights play their set. At first, the skinheads are offended and angry that their politics and their way of life is insulted. But quickly, the anger turns into a healthy release because of the induction of chaos into their orderly world. They are overcome and fall in love with the rhythm of chaos, despite their stark differences. So that moment, obviously captured me because I had to write that down. I thought it was an important moment. And
for you, that was chaos versus order.
Sure. They're on stage. The skinheads have an order about them, and they're a punk band. Obviously, they're super chaotic. Based on the beginning of this film, they demonstrate nothing but being a bunch of punk chaos kids. And they instill themselves. I mean, the skinheads are overcome despite themselves. They hate these guys because of this song they just played, but they're overcome and they rock with them. So I think that's very important.
Any thoughts about that, Scott?
I think it's a great perspective and I thought it's really clever and insightful to see the order versus chaos thing. And I agree that the punks kind of bring in that chaos. But this is also where the movie lost me, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Wow. The scene, my favorite scene is what made you go, no, this is not working.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Yeah.
Well, we start diving into cultural things, and I know you have an outline, and I want to respect the outline, but I think it's probably a good idea to let you know a little bit about me and where I've been. I don't know if you've heard of Whitefish, Montana, or Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. That's where the neo-Nazi Richard Spencer enclave was. I was there. I moved to Montana in 2001. I was there from 2001 to 2004. So I have business dealings where a lot of the people that were selling the product that I was a manager for were in fact either sovereigns or Nazis or both. So being in that culture, at the same time, if you go back to 1984, when I saw Black Flag in this really small club called the Pop Shop just in Cleveland, it was my first introduction to the real hardcore scene where, I mean, I couldn't imagine what do guys do for a living that have these 1.5 spikes in their hair? And these were really raggedy, like safety pins through all sorts of body parts and stuff. So I've always been on the fringe of it, but there is a history of violence and antagonism between punks and skinheads and the hardcore that I felt like the movie in that moment lost the narrative that I thought it could have had. And that's just based on the fact that ever since I was a kid in Ohio, I can't get away from these Mooger Foogers. And so a lot of the behavior and the idea that these Nazis would react positively to this band in any way, shape, manner, or form made narratively absolutely no sense to me whatsoever, because I have personally witnessed the carnage that happens because really fundamentally, one side of it is the Nazis, the other side, the punk side, was the basis, one could argue, for Antifa. So the idea that these two disparate groups would coexist, that's where the movie kind of lost me. And I thought they had this great opportunity to really bring in that element of the horror. But that's the last time that you see the cultural divide. And the rest of the movie becomes an A24, kind of and I liked it, but man, it has such a great beginning. And then they just went away from what I thought could have made the movie great, if that makes any sense.
I disagree because I think it's not set to be realistic. You're right. If they went to a Nazi club and played Nazi punks fuck off, that would happen. They would boo them. They would throw bottles at them, but they would not stop. They would continue until they were off the stage. They would chase them off the stage. That's what would happen. That's what would happen in real life. But this is a movie that is trying to exemplify chaos and order and how they interact. And I believe that this is a foreshadowing how chaos overcomes order. And I just think it's a device. I mean, I just watched a movie last night called Killing of a Sacred Deer. And like the lead character was so like unbelievable. But it's like after a while, I realized, he's just like a literary device. He's not a real person. He's just a representation of this thing. And that's what I think the turn of that is. Because I have some experience with that as well. Is it okay if I go into my punk rock background real quick? Not Skinheads, but Steve Barnes? Lindsey says no, let's not.
Well, I want to give you guys room to express whatever you want. I'm like, this is different than from your Skinhead section, right?
Yes.
Because I don't want to get too off the outline.
Well, sure.
I'll lose the plot. But go ahead, Steve.
Sure. Well, Scott was talking about coming up.
You can respond to what Scott said, of course.
Right. So, I grew up in the scene. Like, I grew up in the suburbs. I moved to the suburbs when I was like 11, didn't really have any friends. When I got to high school, I finally met a friend, a punk rocker, took me under his wing, and started taking me to shows, showing me around. He inadvertently had also been kind of tutored by an older guy named Paul, who that is kind of how I've gotten associated with everything that I've ever done. Stems from Jay, stems from Paul, getting to meet all the bands I've been in, go to all the different shows I've been in since like 1986. And the first show was like a COC DRI show, very punk rock, very hardcore, very dangerous, but very fun. And sure, skinheads would come to shows back in those early days, but they weren't like an ever-present in Virginia. They would show up at shows in their little uniforms, but they wouldn't go to like 7-Eleven wearing that. They wouldn't go to the Food Lion wearing that. You know what I mean? Like they would pick their moments.
I do.
So they were on the outskirts. I don't even know. Nobody associated with them. And when we get to the skinhead moment, when I get to talking about that, I'll talk about the skinheads that I was friends with and how they transitioned into skinheads. But yeah, same with me. I've always gone to shows. The show when they were playing the show at the restaurant, when they were just kind of awkwardly in front of like the to-go window, and like the one guy with the mohawk was like jamming to him. And by the way, me and my friends did the mohawk things and had like, it's just, you use simple stuff like mayonnaise or just glue, just household items to hold it up. It's real simple. That's what the guy in the movie probably did. But I've played shows in really uncomfortable bars like that where a band is not supposed to be and it's entirely too loud and it's in the way. But you don't realize it when you're a kid. You're just having some fun. So those type of shows, when they played in there, I could definitely relate with that. I've never played in a skinhead bar with Confederate flags. I've never been to a club that has Confederate flags on the walls, even in Richmond, Virginia.
But you might have had a cup crunched up on the floor. Like they did.
Absolutely.
There was something they were stepping on, cups, tin cans.
Oh yeah. Yes. It's people are better about that kind of thing now. I think just over time, people have just learned to be better. In the 80s or 90s, you would trash the club. That's just what you did. You were dumb kids and you trashed the club. And now us dumb kids are adults and we want to teach our kids right.
Well, I guess just to give my thoughts about the whole, I mean, I'm not like either one of you. I'm not like, I have all this experience. I have gone to shows, but not really shows like this. And if I did, I would be on the sidelines for sure. I would never be in the middle because I like finding a bar stool and being able to see everything, but I'm not going to be in that mess.
Yeah.
But for me, the scene worked. I saw it a little different than Steve kind of expressed in that I didn't see it like, oh, they respected them or all of a sudden. And I know he didn't really say, oh, they liked them. But, it wasn't like they were, oh, yeah, we like these guys now. It was just more like they wanted to rock out. And if you remember, Tadpole tells them, I recommend you stick with your earlier stuff. So he kind of gave them direction about what songs would appeal to the crowd. Now, of course, they went against that by deciding they were going to do this Nazi punk song, but it was a pretty short song. It was a pretty short song. It was like their memories are short. They're like, they didn't like it. They were booing. They were spitting. If they had kept on that thing, then I think something bad would have happened, but they changed to like this other like non-confrontational song that was exactly what was going to appeal to this crowd. So they kind of at that point went with them. But at the same time, I do sort of agree with one part Steve was saying, which was it's a storytelling device because they needed, for the purposes of the story, yes, when they go to this performance, you're thinking, oh, this is going to be bad. Something's going to go wrong during this concert. And that's what this movie's going to be about. But it doesn't. And that helps to kind of amp up the tension because what it does is you're like, oh, something bad's going to happen. And then, oh, it's okay. Never mind. The show's over. They went to collect their cash. They're getting their instruments. They're going to go. And then you get into this new tension. So it does this seesaw thing to your emotions and it just elevates the tension so that you're like this tightly wound, like I said, a taut drama. It's like this catch and release. You're like, oh my gosh, there's something. And then it's like, no, it's okay. And then you're like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen now? So that it just works to kind of create that teeter-totter of emotions that works so well for me, at least. So the bad stuff that happened needed to not happen during the concert. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
Just a few things about, I wanted, since this is like a film, we're going to talk about the film from a film critic aspect too.
Oh, yeah.
Is some of the components that stuck out to me were the lighting of the movie. It starts in the daytime, of course, with them waking up in this cornfield. So the lighting is low. Then they arrive in the Pacific Northwest and it's nighttime and Tadpole's going to work and they go to his apartment. Then they leave. They do this funny performance at this Mexican restaurant. The light is also low. Then they arrive at the bar and that's probably the lightest it is outside for any of the movie because they arrive and it's for a matinee. They're performing at 3:00. And then, of course, all the chaos that happens, it's nighttime. And then when they wake up and they're outside again, it's dawn. So I thought that aspect really worked really well too, that they always worked in this low lighting or nighttime situation. Nothing's happening in broad daylight or it's very sunny out. Of course, this is Pacific Northwest, so they probably have they have low lighting. But that's one of the first things I noticed when the movie opens is the low light in the van on the face of Anton Yelkin. He wakes up and in this cornfield.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that component?
Scott, you first.
Yeah, I do. I thought the lighting was brilliant. What is amazing to me, and hats off to the editors and the post-production, because everything has this green pall to it, like at every scene. But the skin tones are vibrant, a little bit pale. Like, they did a fantastic job making certain that the people themselves weren't green, but everything else around it. And this green menace just starts creeping in minute after minute, and it really brought a lot of attention to it. I also remember a lot of like subdued oranges and reds throughout it. And I thought that was fantastically done. There's a lot of elements of this movie that I thought were, from a technical perspective, absolutely fantastic. The framing, the crane shots. I mean, I was hooked. As soon as the cornfield and they had to go siphon the gas, I was hooked.
Yeah.
I mean, I was completely sucked into this movie. I was like emotionally engaged with every member of that band. And then when they spoke exactly like, but it was the lighting that really played on that. And I thought, technically, wow, they really knew what they wanted to do. And I thought they executed it extremely well.
Yeah, I didn't really have any comments about the lighting. Y'all nailed it, so I didn't have any additional comments, Lindsey.
Yeah, I think another thing that impressed me is how this movie manages to be somewhat violent and gruesome, but without being very non-gratuitous about it. Except for, there's a few exceptions to that. A lot of the violence happens like through the door, or again.
Oh, right.
Remember,
right.
Steve? We argued with the other movie about was the violence on screen or not.
Right.
Poor Eric Edelstein is cut up with the box cutter, but it's after he's dead, so it's not like done to torture him or anything.
Oh, that was gruesome.
And the dog mauling scenes, again, they happen in the dark, so it's not like this gory movie that. If it was another movie, he would have been another type of movie. You would have cut him with a box car, and his entrails would have spilled out all over the floor. So it was not done to be gratuitous with the violence. So I always enjoy that, because I feel like the other thing about this movie is it's something that even a person that doesn't typically want to handle horror in that way could watch and not be too tainted. But Steve, you might have a different opinion.
Yeah, I've got a wildly different opinion. I mean, I thought it was super gruesome. I mean, the suspense was awful. And then they would, like you said, they wouldn't focus on it, but they would show you just enough. And then the characters would react, and I would just be cringing. This was such a suspenseful, I thought it was just nasty. I mean, I really did. I mean, it was... I got to disagree with you on that one. I thought it was very violent, very suspenseful, very gross.
Steve, you're such a sweet child.
Mommy, what do you expect from me?
I'm more with Lindsey on this one. Like, for me, the movies that I reference in a movie like this, Straw Dogs is the first one to come to mind, but that had, brutal rape scenes in it. I mean, there's parts of Straw Dogs. There's good reasons it was banned, but there's another movie that I thought this kind of, there's a Venn diagram overlap, and that is You're Next, which came out somewhat before this, where the guys who are invading the house don't realize that the one girl was raised at an Australian survivalist camp. So she takes them out while they're trying to kill the whole family, and she takes them out brutally. So with You're Next, they show on screen decapitation with wire, really gratuitous, really over the top. I agree with Lindsey. What really amped up, I thought, the horror element was I identified with Sam. Like, when she gets killed, they gave just enough that I had that emotional thing. And I think if they had, had the up close how she actually died in the aftermath, it would have ruined the movie. I thought they were really good And because you care about the character, it wasn't like revenge torture or violence porn or anything like that. It's like the people still had their dignity a little bit, and I like that.
Yeah. In the horror world, we talk about the dread versus gore scale, that there's some movies that are like all about the tension, and this movie was very tense, but it wasn't super bloody. I'm not saying it wasn't violent or suspenseful. It was, but sometimes imagination, what you get in your imagination is worse than you can get on the screen. Like Scott mentioned, what happens to Sam? I'm like, you have that in your imagination now. Oh my gosh, like what happened to her? And what happened to Tiger? Like, you know, part of you wants to see, but then part of you is kind of glad you don't have to look at it.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to talk about, and I know Scott also had some thoughts about this, is kind of the introductory sequence of the movie. And this is something that I think really worked well. So we've talked about it a little bit, but this group wakes up in a cornfield. They go siphon gas. They return to their car. They arrive in the city. They do this interview and do this random show. They go to the show. They play this controversial song. So the way I want to frame this before I hand it over to Scott to talk about the topic of realism is what I think works so well is that you learn so much about these characters from just watching them at the beginning. So what did we learn from them by watching them? So what I learned from them is that they're good at improvising. They're willing to divert from the plan. They're willing to try new things. They're willing to take chances. And they work together. You know, they talk to each other and they say, like, what are we going to do next? Like, they check in with each other is what I mean. So they're kind of a good team. So I feel like for me that the scene, like, there's not a lot that's happening, right? It's all set up for what's going to happen later. But I feel like it's such great character building through not a lot of exposition. They just show you things and you pick up on who these characters are at the very part. So I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are about this. And yeah,
the realism of that first part I thought was fantastic. The dynamic within the band, like they didn't overly show, but Sam was in charge of the band. Mm-hmm. She was in charge of the finances. They all respected her. I loved that part, but it's when they're up in the apartment, and apologies, I can't remember all the characters' names, but the one dude is going through the record because they don't. This is the problem I had with it. The guy that pulled out the albums and goes, "Oh, this guy's true," and then they put the song on, and then it's an immediate cut. I'm like, I wanted to know more about that, right? So they were so realistic. When they're doing the interview, there were some inside jokes that I just loved. Again, it sucked me in when, you know, we're interviewing the Ain't Rights from Washington and he chimes in, actually, we're from Arlington. You know, you have to live in the DC area, I think, to get that joke.
I got it.
It was really well. It was just handled so well. And then, you know, you don't do any promotion, you don't do any recording. And they do that pretentious bullshit of, marketing and album sales would ruin the whole thing. Like, it exists in the live performance only. That was such inspired writing. It's like, man, I know these people. In fact, I just talked to a guy from the UK, very similar mindset. And it was just freaking great. At the same time, you know, the whole siphoning gas thing, like, they're really not good characters. Like, they live this ethos of the absolute freedom and the whole punk thing, but they're stealing other people's gas to live.
Exactly.
You know, so it was so realistically done. It was fantastic. And I wanted, you know, it's like The Wizard of Oz. When it first came out, people hated that it went from black and white to color. And you had all these changes. The Wizard of Oz flopped when it was first released. And I felt like there was that, like you were saying, Lindsey, that ethereal moment where it's Wizard of Oz. We're no longer in that world. We're in the other world. I wish they had done a little more development on the Nazi side. And my overall impression is this should have been a 2-hour movie. I think it's an hour and 20. It's it's not long. I felt like there were like 15 lines of dialogue that were edited out that would have given that continuity between the hyper realism of the first part and then a little understanding. The second part could have had the same thing. And that's just me being a pretentious metalhead, man. I wanted to have that keep going through, and it all disappeared. It just, everything just went.
I kind of disagree. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think you're correct. Because, yeah, their interview style, and they're a chaotic band, and that goes without showing. That goes without saying. But I think as the movie moved on, it was showing us how the skinheads operate, and everything is meticulous, and everything is planned out, and everything is detailed, and you have like many moving parts within. So I think that is what the movie was kind of showing us, is like these two different factions, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I also disagree. I think I adore this movie, and I think lines can turn into exposition. And that what I appreciate about this movie so much is its economy, including, like you mentioned, Scott, how they play the record and cut it off. I thought that worked so well because we know they had a crazy wild night. We don't need to see it.
Right.
And it was brilliant when she says, "We're going to drink now." And then it's a cut.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up the next morning. Oh, you're the first one to fall asleep. If you're in on the joke, you get it. So I see what you're saying there.
And,
I agree.
And Jeremy Saulnier did say, like, this movie isn't about Nazis. Like, it's not about skinheads. Like, it's about being in that scene, like the punk kid, the punk band, being in that scene, what it means to be punk. And what I think about is interesting about that interview scene that I want to point out is last night I didn't watch the whole movie again because I had just watched it a few nights ago, but I was watching part of the commentary, and when they were doing their interview and they start speaking and say, it needs texture. We need the analog style. You have to, it's all aggression. You have to show up. And after that, it's over and you all go home. And I was thinking, oh, they're not just talking about their music or why they don't do social media. They're also the director and the writer, which is the same. He directed and wrote. So I can say that. They were kind of in a way telling you what's going to happen in the rest of the movie. Because it's analog, it's aggression, it's about like making a performance. Their whole way that they rebel against this group, that they fight against them, is all a performance. Because even that one guy, Tiger, he goes forward to bite the guy, and Anton Yelchin says to him, "What was that crazy shit you just did?" Because he's like, in wrestling, I'm going to break this guy's arm. Like, everything they do in a way is almost like a theatrical performance that they're putting on. And they freak the people out because they're not reacting the way they're supposed to be in there, cowering and doing whatever they say. And they decide they're going to put on a show. And, he's banging with a stick against a metal trash can. He's not doing anything. He's just making noise.
Chaos.
But it freaks the people out. It's effective. So I appreciate how they kind of used that interview at the beginning even to describe what's going to happen in the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I remember in the interview too, like the next day they were kind of making fun of, I think it was the drummer that was kind of making fun of Tadpole and how, he has to do his hair all up. That's classic too. That's, there's divisions within punk rock, just like there's divisions within skinheads. Oh, yeah. And there's like the true like punks that just wear like white t-shirts and jeans. And then there's the guys that like dress up and make a big show of it, And of course I was one of those kids that like, wanted to make a show of it until I was about 15 or 16. And then I chilled out from that point on. But, when I first got into it, I really got into it and got made fun of at shows for it. Just like these punks are making fun of Tadpole. I've been there, Tadpole.
Good points.
Okay, so let's transition into some skinhead news or history. Steve, are you ready for this?
This week in skinheads. Yeah, sure. Okay, well, skinheads actually came out of culture from the 1960s. Back in the 1960s, it was a time of uprising both in America and in the UK. And you had like mods and rockers and rock and roll happening. In the black culture in England, you had these guys who were called rude boys. And the rude boy culture, was like ska, reggae, They would wear beanies and they would wear, bomber jackets, the boots, the braces, the jeans with the cuffs. That was their style. So when the mods from England kind of started hanging out with these guys, the white guys, that is, then they started kind of like copying their style, hanging out with the rude boys. And so they were just called skinheads. That's basically what a skinhead was a white rude boy. And to be a rude boy and to be a skinhead at that time was to be, non-racist, was to be, with the black culture, with Jewish culture. The only thing that was problematic was something that was called Paki bashing. They didn't like Pakistan individuals. So both the rude boys and the skinheads would beat up on them. And that was like I don't know, they made enemies with the Pakistan people. And in doing so, also involved neo-Nazis. So the neo-Nazis that they were feuding with, the skinheads and the rude boys, eventually started adopting the same style too, that militaristic look with the shaved head and the bomber jacket. And pretty soon, the Nazis looked just like the skinheads. And people were calling Nazis skinheads, Nazi skinheads. So the skinheads, the original skinheads at that time, had to differentiate themselves from that group because they were kind of getting taken over by Nazis. So they called themselves the Sharp Gang, which is Sharp stands for Skinheads Against Racial Prejudice. So that was, who the skinheads that we see to this day that do not have Nazi symbols on their jackets. A lot of times they'll have, maybe pride symbols, Black Lives Matter. When you see like the Black Lives Matter protests that were happening a couple years ago, the Sharp skinheads were there, with them on their side. However, these neo-Nazis coexisted at pretty much the same time. And when you see skinheads at a show, it's very hard to tell at first glance between a Sharp skinhead and a Nazi skinhead, or just your normal run-of-the-mill dude that dressed like a skinhead, which might have been me at one time. At one time, I had a shaved head. I wore a trench coat. I had Doc Martens, and I liked the braces. I did that. I wasn't a skinhead, but I kind of looked like one in a way. That was just part of the punk culture. I had a friend, Chris, that I went to school with that was a Sharp skinhead, and he liked to get in the mix. He liked to go and anytime somebody was disrespecting a woman or a black guy or anything, Chris wanted to get in the mix and be the hero. He really wanted to fight, but he wanted to fight on the right side. So that's what Chris was. He was a Sharp skinhead that I went to school with and associated with. So another skinhead that I was close with was his fella Tommy, and I'm going to shout him out. Tommy Williams. He's a very popular Richmond skinhead, always has been. And he started out his days as a Nazi. He would come to shows with his Nazi friends because he lived in the rural area, and they would start fights and be rowdy and whatever. Tommy switched sides eventually. It took some time, but he eventually adopted the punk, Sharp skinhead lifestyle, got his Nazi tattoos covered up, and, proclaimed himself from that forward. He was very, he was really humble about it. He liked to talk about it a lot. Anybody who might know Tommy Williams will agree he's the type of person that likes to hold court and talk about how he transitioned from a Nazi to a Sharp. And, it is an interesting story. I got to hang out with him a lot because my girlfriend and his girlfriend were best friends. So by default, we did a lot of stuff together, and I've heard a lot of his stories. So the Nazis, like I said before, would not be hanging out in social areas as Nazis. They would just come to shows, or if there was a protest or if there was a political thing happening, that's when the Nazi skinheads would put their uniforms on and show up. And it's easy to tell a Nazi skinhead from a Sharp by if you look at their patches, the Nazi skinheads are proud to put the SS, the Iron Cross, the number 88 has a lot of significance for some reason. And the shoelaces on their boots, it's not just white and red. I'm going to go over all the colors real quick, and then I'll be done. The white, of course, means that you're a Nazi skinhead. You're for white purity. And the red means that you have spilled blood for the cause, or maybe that you have killed somebody for the cause. If you have blue shoelaces on, that means that you have killed a police officer. If you have yellow shoelaces on, that means that you are not a Nazi skinhead. You are a Sharp skinhead. And if you have pink shoelaces on, of course, you're LGBT friendly and you're pro-feminism. I believe those are the only colors that I know of. Oh, there is green. Let me look up real quick because everybody's saying, what is green? Because this is green room, right? What are the green laces?
You get paid for being a skinhead.
Nope. Yeah, green laces are environmentalist. You're an environmentalist skinhead, and you fight for, and you're peaceful. You don't fight. So if you see a guy with green laces on, he's safe to approach. You can even push him around. He's not going to fight. He's a pacifist.
Oh, well.
Such a complicated world, man.
It is. Let me see if I had any other notes I didn't go over here. Oh, yeah. So they talk about this in the movie, how within the Nazi skinhead community, there are even further divisions that divide them, because there's the ultra left skinheads, Nazi skinheads. And those ultra left means therefore like libertarian causes. They don't want taxes. They don't want government schools. And then you have your far right who are more for, racial purity. So some skinheads may feel more strongly about one cause than the other. They both will have one of those causes as their number one, and then the other is number two. So like to some, it's more important. And so I think to some of these skinheads like Amber and Daniel in our movie that kind of switch sides, I kind of get the feeling they were probably more for like the libertarian type skinheads. And they weren't liking, what was going on within there. And that's why they were rebelling, perhaps.
Any thoughts about all that, Scott?
So apparently everything I didn't like about the second half of the movie is because I missed it. One thought, you just did a really compelling synopsis of American History X. Like I'm pitching Edward Norton holding court. My reaction to this is simple. I am going to buy the movie and I'm not going to rent it, and I'm going to watch it again because Lindsey, I think you nailed it. And it's like, because I did never equated the banging of the trash can and how the narrative I thought they didn't carry probably did carry. But my thing still stands. Like, this movie wasn't over the top successful. It didn't even make its earnings back. And I think one of the reasons could have been that they did the spirit, even though it was there technically, but I'm going to watch it again. I'll have a different opinion. I really want to watch that. And I hope we can get to some of the other characters like Imogen Poots. And
we're going to talk about the characters.
Yeah, she was.
This film's award-winning. Maybe it didn't make its money back, but it's award-winning. It's won tons of awards. Right, Lindsey?
It's certainly, not tons. I mean, and
I saw at least 3.
Well, yeah, that's not tons.
For me, it is, just one award.
It won some indie awards.
Respect for indie.
Steve, I appreciate all that research, but I guess then the question I have is, so what did they get right? Are the skinheads in this movie realistic?
I've never seen an organized group of skinheads like this before, like in their inner workings. I've only know Tommy, and I only know of the guys that would come to like the shows and stand on the outskirts of the pit with their arms crossed. So I never actually talked to these guys or know their inner workings. But I mean, I can imagine this is exactly what it's like. They probably take over a VWF hall, like, a veterans hall, and they encourage the kids to come there and, blow off steam and drink and play their music as long as they do their work and support their cause or whatever. Apparently, I mean, I think that this is an accurate portrayal according to what I've read, the couple of interviews that I read that I can't quote right now. But, this dude did some research around Oregon, and he based this place after another specific place that was pretty much exactly like this.
So I think I was thinking, what are the signs that it's not going to go right? What are the first moments it's not going to go right? And for me, it's the locked gate, the barking dogs, and the guy almost choking you for making one offhand comment.
Dude, what? The locked gate? I don't remember a locked gate.
Yeah.
When the band arrives at the bar, they almost pass it, and it's like a locked gate.
Oh.
And then you hear dogs barking. They come in, and then he gets out of the van and makes one comment, and the guy almost chokes him, So it's like, that was I thought that was funny. But
I've played parties before, and sometimes loading into a party can be like that, where you're loading in, you're like, where am I supposed to go? This a barn? Are we playing in a barn? And yes, we're playing in a barn, I guess. And you're not sure where to park. Nobody chokes you. But, I mean, yeah, the barking dogs in the gate are, it happens in Virginia.
I was curious about this road crew, the roadie crew that helps them. That I was curious if you guys thought this was typical or untypical. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm saying, as the band, in your mind, if you're arriving, let's say you're arriving at this gig and you're going to play, and you encounter Macon Blair, Gabriel, mm-hmm. giving you these directions with no sense of humor, no smiling, just
absolutely,
on in
every time.
Sound check in 15, you're on in 20.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Don't put your equipment here, it's a fire hazard.
That's right.
And there's nowhere else to put it.
And why weren't you here a half an hour earlier? And
we just described the St. Vitus in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no room. Yeah.
So that is very true. There is a sound guy and then a couple of guys that run around that, help you get your stuff kind of and tell you where to put it. And we're not always friendly. Depends on who you know and what time you catch them and all kinds of stuff.
And when he slipped in, are you using eardrum kit or the house drum kit?
Yeah.
That's totally. In fact, I think most of the shows I've been to, similar, exact same situation.
I don't know. I've heard of a house kit, but I don't know. No band I've ever played with has used the house kit. Drummers love their kits, man.
Yeah, I think that would be like, of course, you always want to use your own unless you're in a situation where you don't, you're traveling, you don't have it with you.
You drove a moped to the show, yeah.
And loading in and loading out's no joke. I thought, again, that was clever. Obviously, the writer had experience in bands because it was a great inside thing. I thought it was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, of course, then later they have the instruments all out in the hallway. What about the fire code?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. All right.
Darcy comments on it later. This is a fire hazard.
Yeah.
That's right. Darcy knows.
All right. So, yes, let's talk about those characters. Who are your favorites? And also, I want to explore the question, are there just good guys and bad guys in this movie? And are there shades of gray?
Who you want to go first, Lindsay?
Scott, you go first.
Money, Mo.
Imogen, her character was Amber, right?
Yes.
Did they ever really explain her, or she's just there?
A little bit. I
don't think they give. She was absolutely fascinating to me, and of course Anton Yelkin's character and the way they survived at the end, I thought it was great. And those were my two favorites. And I got to give it to Mr. Darcy. He had that menace. He had that quiet, assured menace. And by the way, I don't think it was realistic as much as it was a riff on the Lost Boys. Because he was very much like, what's his name, Richard Herman, in the Lost Boys. It's the kids that are the vampires, but there's the old man. Mm-hmm. So I felt there's a little bit of Lost Boys.
I can see that.
So I thought he was great. I mean, those were the most fleshed out characters. The other one, the character who turned, it was the boyfriend of the girl who got stabbed.
Daniel. Yeah.
And then
Daniel.
You're getting ready.
Mark Webber is his name.
You're getting ready to know him, and all of a sudden there's a bullet to the head. Boom, he's gone.
Quickly. Yep.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. I really identified with all the characters. Sam, she got taken out way too early. It's like, agreed. I thought for sure she'd be the final girl, right? Mm-hmm. Nope.
Yeah, just a couple of facts about the people you spoke about. Mark Webber, whose cousin Daniel, he's in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Mm-hmm. So he has experience in band movies before. As far as Amber goes, one thing I wanted to mention, it's interesting because she was there with the cowcatchers, but when he says cowcatchers all leave, she stays. So I wondered if she was actually friends with the girl that stabbed, with the knife in the head, that she was just kind of tagging along as her friend. And she wasn't in the band herself, but she was just with them. So she's not allowed to leave with them because I guess they think she's a flight risk. But if you guys remember, I mentioned how Patrick Stewart, they kind of keep him at a distance. They did the same thing with her character. When they come into the room and she's there, she's never really on the screen fully. She's kind of off to the side and they don't focus on her. And the first time they do kind of put her in the center of the screen and give her a close up, that's the signal that the band has accepted her into their group. Because there before, Sam definitely doesn't want, she keeps like kind of sidelining her and saying like, we're not going to trust you. You're not part of us. Right. But they kind of visually show when the group accepts her when she's on the screen for the first time, and which is during the scene where they, his arm gets torn up. She's finally like part of the group. But yeah, Steve, what about you and your character babies?
Yeah, this movie wasn't really like a character movie. I didn't really feel close to any of these characters. I didn't feel like I really knew any of them. With that being said, there was no diversity. In a sea of white dudes, we have two women. So, of course, they stood out to me, Amber and Sam. And, of course, like I said, Aaliyah Shawkat was like a big draw for me just to even see this movie. So her character stood out to me. And Amber, with her turn, by the way, yes, she and the girl that was stabbed and Daniel were all planning on leaving at the second to last Cowcatcher song. They were going to bail and get out of there. And they had some stuff they were taking with them, and they were going to narc on the Nazi gang. So that's what Amber was in on that. She was part of that crew. But as for other characters that I liked, I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's hard to really like be drawn to any of these. I was immediately drawn to the guy from Blue Ruin. And, he looked too friendly to be a neo-Nazi, so I kind of had these suspicions about him. So, I had my eye on him the whole time. Eric Edelstein also draws my eye. I think he's a fun guy. So any character he plays, I'm going to enjoy. As for the rest, they can kick rocks,
They did. They pretty much did.
I kept trying to figure out how I knew Eric Edelstein. I was like, is that Hopper? I mean,
No, he looks like Hopper though, right?
I know, but he just had that. It wasn't just how he looks, but it was also how he was kind of acting, the way he was kind of trying to take control, but yet he never really has control. Like He always tries to boss Eleven around and she's like, whatever. And he's like, he just loses his temper more. That's what that guy reminded me of.
I think his big role was Jurassic World. He played like one of the dinosaur trainers in Jurassic World. And I think he had a big moment and a big death in that movie.
Aaliyah Shawkat, what did you know her from, Steve?
Arrested Development, and then she was also in a show called Search Party. Fantastic show. And just anytime I see her pop up in a movie, like me and Heather just both love her, just her vibe, her off-screen vibe, her on-screen vibe. She is punk. I mean, without a doubt. So she's perfect for this movie.
She was in another music movie called The Runaways, and she played in a band in that, which I have not seen.
Is it up on the Joan Jett Runaway, Lita Ford? No, not
I was going to say she'd be.
Oh no, it's called The Runaways. That's fine.
Yeah,
gotta be. It's gotta be. Was Jennifer in that movie too? Jennifer Lawrence also in the movie The Runaways?
I just got this from Wikipedia, Steve.
Okay, all right. Because if it was, then yes, that's the Runaways story about Joan Jett. Yeah.
For me, I was like, my person was Tiger, Callum Turner. I
heard you say that before. Who was that?
The green-haired guy, the singer.
Okay, all right. Yeah, he was cool.
Ain't right. Yeah.
He led the chaos.
He's really hot. I was just like, that's the guy I would have a crush on.
Great lead singer for a punk band.
And what I thought was interesting about his performance is both he and Joe Cole, I mean, we said that they also hadn't performed before, but they also hadn't been in that many movies. So they were kind of the newbies of the group as far as stars. They had starred in some shorts, but they were pretty new to the acting scene. So I think for Callum Turner, this was his first feature movie role. Joe Cole had done a couple other things before, but he was this is an absolutely great first performance for Callum Turner doing this. I feel like this was a great role for him. And I also really liked the character of Gabe, played by Macon Blair. Yeah, he now that it makes more sense knowing that he's worked with this guy before, but his character would be the one I would say had some shades of gray, as well as Daniel, because I mean, maybe Daniel isn't that nice, but he certainly cares about his girlfriend and, maybe prioritizes her over his allegiance to Patrick Stewart. But as far as Gabe goes, he just had an empathetic air to him. I don't know if that, even though he was being bossy and he was the one enforcing the fire codes, but he was the trusted kind of, in a way, the lieutenant of Darcy Banker. He's the one that he's like, I trust my stuff with you. So, but yet he sort of doesn't like what's happening. So it's interesting to think of why people like that end up situations like this. If this isn't really a scene he would want to be part of, like, how did he end up in this position? It might be that. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
I was going to say, it seems clear that he's like, an ideologue, but now he's like in the thick of it. And he's like, whoa, this is way more than I expected. And we see him like, change at that moment. So I do think he's never seen anything like this before.
Now that you're talking, he reminds me a bit of Dante from Clerks. I wasn't even supposed to be here today.
Sure.
Like, he hasn't bought in. He hasn't totally committed.
He should have said that at some point.
He tries his bubbling best, but I think the closest analog to him definitely is Dante.
Well, he's the one that ends up cleaning up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting because, like, the movie, I think it was Love Lies Bleeding, came out this year with Kristen Stewart and the bodybuilder. You find out about Kristen Stewart's character is she's the cleanup person. Her dad is kind of a psychotic killer, and she's the one that gets cleaned up. And then, of course, she's trying to get away from him, but she ends up working in this bar cleaning up like shitty toilets. So she continues in that role of being the cleanup person, and she can't seem to get away from that role. Yeah, and I just thought some of the lines he had were so good. We're not keeping you. You're just staying. I mean, who talks like that?
Nazis.
Counselors.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
a scout
therapist speak.
Yeah, or a negotiator, like somebody who can kind of keep people trapped without. So I thought it was interesting that their weapons that they end up using, they don't have weapons, of course. They have a gun with no bullets. They end up with like fluorescent tubes and a box cutter. So if you were in a green room like this, like, what would be your weapon of choice? What do you think might be in the room you could use as a weapon to defend yourself?
If there's any sort of wooden shelf, just something big, heavy, and wooden, preferably with a jagged, really sharp corner or something, and something that I could use to block. I don't want a defensive weapon as much as an offensive. I don't see the fluorescent lamp doing much. But it depends on, they could have done a Mario Bava or a Argento and gotten the eye. But no, I'd want something big and planky. So bookshelf.
Yeah, and the stereo equipment on the shelf, like that was like some big, heavy, like 40-pound or probably like 30-pound piece of equipment you could smash somebody on the head with, or any kind of like pole. Like, I'm looking in my room right now, and I would probably grab this mic stand. The bottom of this is pretty heavy. I'd probably smash someone on the head with that. Not bad. In rock and roll, you got to smash somebody on the head with a guitar. So, you grab a guitar. There's got to be a guitar in the green room. That's the most rock and roll thing to do.
God, and then you could use the guitar strings to garrote them.
Oh, well, I was wondering if you could use like my... Yeah.
Like, remember Whiplash? The guy like threw the cymbal at the other guy. You could take somebody's head off with that thing, man. So absolutely a cymbal.
Yeah. The problem with some of these things is always, which I think about, is I got like a small axe thing, and I call it a machete, even though I don't think it's really a machete. But it's a little thing meant to, so I can chop things that in my yard. And I was thinking about it the other day because I was like, oh yeah, that could be a potential weapon if someone tries to break into my house. And I was like, you'd have to get awful close to somebody to be able to use that as a weapon. So of course, some of these, like that mic stand isn't very long, Steve. So you get real close to someone to be able to bash them in the head with that. But
The best thing is like if you're in a green room, they're going to have cans of beer, bottles of water, things like that. You get a pillowcase and you stuff the pillowcase full of like, cans of beer or a bottle of water, whale someone on the head with that thing. But I think the implement that you're talking about, Lindsey, is not good because they could use it on you.
Chop myself.
No, they're going to grab it out of your hand and then use it on you. And that sounds like an awful, I would hate to be like mauled with a garden utensil. So
yeah. Well, luckily it hasn't happened yet, but
thank goodness there. You got a fire extinguisher right behind you. Look at that fire extinguisher. You can just grab that just like Maybe did and smash someone with that.
We keep making fun of Nazis, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the characters, we're still talking about the characters a little bit. Do these characters represent things to you? How would you typify each of them, and what's their role in the band? So we have Sam, Reese, Pat, and Tiger. So Sam, of course, is Aaliyah Shawkat, the girl. Scott, you already mentioned she's kind of the boss. I agree with that totally.
Yeah.
Reese is the drum player.
So I think he's just supposed to like just like the guys, just like Hutch Harris said, he just represents like the pure chaos. He brings the chaos to the band because I didn't really see much else because he's the guy that like immediately tried to beat up the guy that gave him $6, right? Wasn't that the drummer?
Yeah, he was kind of the if anybody's the muscle, it's him. He kind of reacts very automatically to everything. He's kind of an act now, think later type person.
They didn't seem too worried about that, though. I noticed, like, when he, like, grabbed that dude, like, nobody seemed too upset by that. They weren't like, hey, calm down, man. They're just like, oh, just another Tuesday.
Is that because he's all bluster, maybe? Like, he's all brawn and no bluster?
I think so. Just bashes his drums and doesn't do anything else. Let's see. I think the bass player guy, because y'all keep saying that Sam is the leader of the band. It's clear that she makes the financial decisions and she makes the decisions about logistics. I think their musical leader is the bass player because he makes the call of like what songs are going to play. And the bass player, eventually was the guy that like became the de facto voice of the room and was our survivor of the whole thing. So I do believe that he's like the band leader and Sam is like the band manager.
I just want to say the most realistic aspect of the movie is, of course, the bass player survives.
Yeah.
He's the most grounded. He has the best ideas. He can execute.
The thickest skull. He's got the thickest skull.
That part of it I bought entirely.
It's so funny because I didn't even notice that he was the bass player. I thought he was the guitarist and Sam was the bass player, but okay, I put him down as I said he was the idea person. He's the thinker. He's the one that gets ideas outside the box. He's the one that said, hey, I've got an idea, guys. Let's perform this Nazi punk song.
That's right.
And he's the one that came up with the strategies for how they were going to negotiate. So I think he's the brains of the operation. Not necessarily, they kind of look, but Sam's definitely the boss because she makes the decisions. But yeah.
Singer's not the leader. Yeah. The singer is not the leader in any respect at all.
Right.
Just has the voice.
So what's his role in the band, do you think?
Helper.
Besides, he's the singer.
He's like the metaphorical bass player because he doesn't have like a specific job in the band except to sing. He doesn't like take control of the band. What's up, Scott?
The de facto bass player of the band. That was a good thing.
I'm a bass player.
The one that you're talking about, it's like they have different leaders. Like the singer's the leader when they're on stage. The bass player is the leader as far as musical direction and what they're doing. But Sam has the purse string. She's got the money, man. So she wasn't
just the purse strings, though. She's the one that said, when he said, what Tiger said, what are we singing next? She's the one that said coronary.
Yeah.
So she's like, I don't know if I agree with Tiger's the leader on stage. He's the front man. He's the face of the band, maybe. But,
right. He's the face. That's what I mean. He's the figurehead of the band.
Sometimes I think he's the party animal. I think he's like the fun guy. He's the one that brings the fun. We've got the muscle, we got the boss, we've got the thinker. Every band needs a fun guy, a party animal to kind of bring the livelihood. So I think that's his role. He's the one that put the record on. He set up the music. So I think he's the one that's kind of fun.
I mean, I hate to say this, and probably I'm going to lose some points with Scott here. So I'm just going to, sometimes when you're in a band or you see a band, there's a couple of members of the band that you're like, this band would not exist if it wasn't for that person or that person. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 people, and it doesn't say anything, bad about the rest of them, but it's like, I think about Clutch, and Clutch couldn't exist without Neil Fallon. It's just simple.
Right.
Dan Maines is a great bass player, and he writes some of their lines, but if something happened to him, he could be replaced on bass. And Primus, right. Les Claypool cannot be replaced. Obviously, their drummer can be replaced because there's been 4 different drummers. I think that Sam and whoever the bass player is cannot be replaced from this band. Pat. The drummer and the singer could be replaced if necessary, but the band could not exist without those 2, without the strings. I think that's the heart of their band. That's what I noticed anyway.
Why would you lose points on that?
Oh, because it seems like I'm downplaying certain members of the band, saying that this person's not important, and which is not the case. It's just some bands are just like, I've been in bands. It's like, this band couldn't exist if Corey wasn't here. If Corey left the band, then we would all just disband. Whereas if I left the band, they would keep going without me. I guess it's just a straight up fact that's can be harsh sometimes.
That's really a good point. It's a good observation. Which also, by the way, is why I thought Sam was going to survive.
Right. Yes.
Wow. I agree with you. And I thought that was, by the way, kudos to the writer on that one, because I thought she was going to be the final girl. But no.
Well, I disagree because Tiger's my favorite character, and I think he had a lot of charisma. So I don't think the singer is the one that kind of needs to have the most energy. They have to bring the energy so that to get the rest of the band hyped up. So I feel like he did perform a role. I mean, they all do. I do agree with what you're saying, but I don't agree with what you're saying for this band, Steve.
Okay, gotcha. That's fine.
Well, we get intense on this podcast.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we're happy to disagree is what it is. We're very happy to disagree.
I see why we're not all in the same studio, especially talking about the weapons and what we could use.
See now that I know you live not too far away, Scott, I'm like gonna get you come down. We can all record together in the same room.
Oh
no! You're another draw. I can be like, Steve, come down because Scott is here too. We can all,
That's right.
That would be cool.
I mean, I am taking a road trip to Chicago next week to go podcast with James, which means I definitely owe you the same respect at some point in the future, Lindsey.
I'll believe it when I see it.
You always say that. I'm just going to be so happy when it happens. I'm like, believe it now.
It's like just a little roast of Steve. I was like, it was funny because when I said he's my main roadie, I was like, even though he never wants to leave the house.
That's right. I'm a helpie.
Okay, so it's been brought up several times that not everybody survived. So are there reasons that the 2 survivors make it to the end, you think, when the others did not? Or is it just random luck of the draw? Are there things about Pat and Amber that make them the survivors? Does that make sense in some way? Or is it like, just 2 people had to be left?
You go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think it does, especially as we talk about the characters. Because they were the most adaptable, right? They were the ones that could switch their role. They were the ones that could improvise. They were clearly the deeper thinkers, especially Antoine's character. He was smart enough to think, it's an old cliche, outside of the 9 dots. He went way out of the box. And he knew that they had to be unpredictable. And Amber picked right up. In fact, he had the idea. She's the one that kind of took charge of it. And the most clever thing that she did, and this got me every single time I watch the movie, is when the one dude is down in that cellar area where the heroin is with Pat. He's down there. And she takes the corpse of the other girl and dangles her feet down.
That's
and
right.
She's counting down the bullets, 2 bullets left. And then he shoots the leg and she goes, no bullets left. It's like, oh, yeah, that's why they survived, because they were smart, they were adaptable, they were unpredictable. Wow, I'm starting to really feel like I like that second act better than I thought. That was great, by the way, when she did that. That was great. And I loved how her character at no point is she subservient to anybody. And it's not a woke movie by any means, but she is great. And then she kills the dude. He's like, "Oh, are we doing that now?" And she's like, "Yeah." I thought we were here to, clean up the crime scene. And she's like, "No, we're here to make another one." Love. Great line.
Yeah, and like you said, she's adaptable. Like her character is totally adaptable because she has transitioned from a Nazi skinhead to a defector. So that's a transition that happened like before we even knew her. So we're watching like a different transition happen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I guess, in a way, we were talking about the one guy, Joe Cole Reese. He's Act Now, Think Later. So, of course, you kind of expect maybe he's going to be dispensed of because he's, the one in the front, because he's like the one acting first. He's going to be the one in the front that's going to be taken out first because he's not the type to hold back and think. Yeah, obviously Amber was adaptable. I'm not sure if we got that from her character by doing anything other than watching her. But yeah, in a way, she's an outsider also. So doesn't really have support from the group to start with. So she has to earn her way in in a way that not other people do.
Sure.
But it's a good point what you said, Scott, that you sort of do expect Sam to survive because she seems like such a badass. And in a sense, when you watch that scene, it's hard to understand exactly that all three of them come out, right? Pat, Amber, and Sam, they all come at the same time. But for some reason, Sam's the one the dogs go to. I'm not sure if they chose her for some reason, that she's the one that gets attacked. It's just that Pat's hanging back a little bit because of his injured arm. So I don't know. It was kind of sad because I really like these guys. I didn't want to see them get taken out one by one. I was kind of, when I look back, I will say the one disappointment I had is watching this movie. I was kind of hoping that the band was all going to survive. I know that's probably too much to expect because it's about them sort of outwitting and outlasting this group of hateful people that are basically trapping them. They caused their own issue, and now these people are paying the price for it, which seems totally unfair. And you'd like them all to be able to survive. So it's kind of sad that they get picked off in a way. And it's like, when you say, Scott, like, this isn't the movie I wanted to watch. Yeah, this isn't what I wanted to watch. Like, the guy who I have a crush on get mauled by a dog. It's it's not happy.
I saw the girl I had a crush on, she died, I think, by a dog too, right? Both our crushes. Both our crushes.
My crush shot Darcy in the back. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing about her and why she survived. Absolutely ruthless. Absolutely committed to whatever was in front of her. She committed without thinking. Plus, she's the only one. She's totally that. She's not part of the band, and she's no longer part of the group. She's completely unpredictable in that, and I thought that's really a clever twist. But she is ruthless. Like, oh no, we are killing them, and then Pat ends up shooting Darcy in the head, which I good kill. That was good.
I mean, shout out to Darcy. It's like they're there with a gun, and he's just still trying to get. He's still thinking he's going to get away. He's like, they shoot at him. He stands up and keeps walking, so.
Yeah.
I do not say shout out to Darcy. I say, Darcy, I knew it. I knew you were a coward because he's all this militaristic skinhead guy. And he's like, when it comes to fight or flight, what are you going to do? You expect a big, bad skinhead guy to fight. But nope, he just turns around and runs. He's choosing the flight. So bye-bye, buddy,
Yeah. Let me, I don't mean to say shout out like I'm rooting for you. I'm not rooting for you, Darcy. But it's wild when you see somebody, most people halt, they freeze or whatever. He didn't. He thought he was going to get away for some reason. So And if they had hesitated, maybe he would. It works for serial killers.
Yeah.
It works for them in movies all the time.
If it would have been up to Pat, he would have gotten away. Again, Amber's that ruthless wild card.
That's true.
You expect her to act a certain way, and she goes, no, boom. So again, I would watch Imogen Poots if she were in a one-woman play reading the phone book. I just think she's that capable an actress. I'm surprised she isn't bigger than she is. She's like Meryl Streep. She can adapt into just about any role. Mm-hmm. And I thought she nailed that character.
Yeah.
I wanted to make one more point about Darcy because, you know, his fight or flight thing, like I said, but also, you know, how orderly and how calculated and how planned and meticulous he was. But now his plan has fallen to crap. So he has no plan. So he just turns around and runs. So I think that, again, it bashes your expectations of what he would do in the face of danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's kind of talk. I think we're nearing towards the ending of both the podcast and the movie. So is there anything else you guys want to say about the ending overall of this film? Because I have a few thoughts, but I want to leave space for you guys if you have anything else to add.
The ending just proves what Scott was saying a moment ago about Amber and how cool and ruthless and badass she is. The very last line, we talk about the ending, she just shut down that desert island crap. She doesn't care. So, I mean,
right.
I love that. I love that Stark ending.
It's like, yeah, I couldn't help but think, are they going to be romantically involved?
Yep.
Are they? She's like, no, which, by the way, would have been a great setup for a sequel. And I think there is plenty of room for a sequel in this if they were ever to do it. And it was frustrating because we don't know Pat's desert island band.
Yeah.
We
could still ask him.
Know.
He lived. So we could still ask him.
Well, then
email
the
him?
actor died. No, he's gone, man.
Yeah.
Pat, what are you talking about? The guy who lasted till the very end with Amber?
Anton Yelkin. That's what I said. He died. This is one of his last movies.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well, I take that back. I was talking about his character. I was saying his character lived.
I know. I was being literally funny.
Wow. Okay. That's a first on this podcast. Oh, wait, this is Lindsey's podcast. I just insulted you. Holy crap. I'm sorry about that. Let's take that one back.
I really like the ending. Of course, you guys know I like this movie, but I think the ending is very disturbing, and that's kind of what I like about it. It is somewhat open-ended. Yes, we don't get to see what the desert island band is or what happens to these two. We leave them on the side of the road, but there's so much that's left unsaid. Even the way it ends with this dog just walking down the road with the leash, and he puts his head on his owner's chest, which is, of course, very moving. As a dog lover, that really got to me, even though this, of course, I don't agree. I don't like what this dog does or what he's been trained to do. But the dog, of course, has been trained to do what he's been trained to do. So it's not the dog's fault, but it's like, what's going to happen to this dog? Who's going to find these bodies? What's going to happen to the skinhead, this regime? What's going to happen to the group? But although I guess we've seen they're not much of a regime anymore, what's going to happen to Gabriel? He's gone off to tell the cops, but we don't know what's going to happen to him either. And I think just so much of the ending really works for me too, is just before him shooting Darcy, they say to him, "You were so scary at night," and just having that moment, just be like, who is this, the monster that I've been fearing? Who is he really? It's just this man that is, like you said, Steve, he's going to run. He has no plan. So he doesn't have anybody to follow his orders. And it just leaves you in sort of a bleak place. It's not a hopeful place at all, but yet I feel like it works. It works so well, and I hope they don't make a sequel. Don't be one of those people that thinks every movie needs a sequel. I was
thinking that too. I was like, no sequel because there's no one left.
We just named them. There's plenty left. I agree with you. I would like to keep the ending ambiguous. I'm not a fan of the constant sequels, but it was a bleak ending. It ended on a good beat. I'm still ticked off about the desert island thing, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a nice device. It's a trick to make you want more.
Yeah.
Are there any other themes of the movie besides, obviously, Steve has the chaos versus order? Did you think there were any themes of the movie, what you got out of it?
Are you asking Scott?
Either one of you that wants to say anything.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really hanging my hat on the chaos versus order, and I'll go more into that in a minute. I wanted to go ahead and say here, because we're at the ending, and last time we podcasted together, Lindsey, we were doing Who Am I? And, we talked nice about the whole film. When we got to the very end, I was like, yeah, I didn't care for this film. I didn't like it. And I thought the guys were weird. I'm not going to watch Green Room again. I didn't enjoy the suspense. I didn't enjoy the killing. I didn't enjoy the second half, Scott. I defended the second half because that's my job, is to, get conversation going. But I didn't like the second half either, man. I'm not going to watch this again. Overall, did not like it. So that's how I feel about the ending. I wish it was just a punk rock movie about loading in and loading out and getting your phone and driving to the next town.
So you do agree with me on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the podcast has served its purpose, and I hope anybody who's listening to this is at least curious, if they haven't seen it, that they see it. And if they decided they didn't like it, it's a chance to watch it from a different lens. I think that is a criticism of the writing, that, again, there's like 5 to 15 lines of dialogue that I think they edited for a time that really could have fleshed this out a little bit.
Sure.
But overall, I'm leaving this experience. I think the chaos against order thing, I don't see as much. I think it's a much more nihilistic and bleak message than that. Love is not going to win the day. That the world itself is chaos. And no matter how orderly they tried to be, the Nazis, but at the end of the day, they got taken out by a one-armed dude and a chick that they dismissed. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a bleak ending. There really weren't any heroes, although I liked her she'd make a great TV series. I know you don't want sequels, but I'd like to see her character on like NCIS or FBI. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Oh, but I can see that. I can see them making a series. Yeah.
A series of like what happens with Amber, and maybe she and Gabe eventually like hook up because they had they knew each other through the club.
I think this movie went too far making sure it didn't have a common theme. That it wasn't necessarily making a statement or a commentary. It was, at the end of the day, it was just a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I have any big themes except for, just kind of what Anton Yelkin and Pat, what he kind of does is sometimes you have to think outside the box. So it's not always about being the strongest or, beating up on someone hard as possible. Use your brain, and that's even in that song, the Nazi punk song. He's like, you got to think. That's how that song ends. The lyrics is like, you have to think for yourself. Yeah. Be punk. That's what punk is. And so I kind of think this movie is sort of punk, the epitome of punk. So with that, of course, we have to talk about, what is your desert island band? What did you come with, gentlemen?
Oh, Steve first.
Yeah, I can dissect this. I'm going to dissect it because you can go different ways with a desert island band. There's 3 different ways you can go. You can go with your all-time favorites, in which case I would pick like a Pink Floyd or like an Iron Maiden or a Black Sabbath, right? But these are bands I've already heard them thousands of times. I don't need to waste time on a desert island, listen to them again. Then you might pick strategically, since you're going to spend a lot of time on a desert island, you might want to pick an artist that has a huge catalog of music, maybe one that you haven't really delved into. I'm thinking like a Buckethead. He has hundreds of albums. Frank Zappa, almost 100 albums. Prince, hundreds of albums in different genres. So I think Prince would probably win out of that category because he's like many genres and stuff, and it's a huge collection, lots of like guests, artists, and things. But then I'm like, my personal preference, what I listen to on a day-to-day basis, like consistently for the past, 10 to 20 years. And like, it's my go-to every day. It's metal. So in that case, I have to choose between these three bands, which would be Clutch, Queens of the Stone Age, and Mastodon. So those were the three that I had to think about and really narrow it down to. And so out of the three of them, I think Mastodon probably has a more diverse catalog that I like to. There's some dreamy stuff to listen to at night. There's some really like heavy, like punky stuff from the early days. And then there's like their hard rock and stuff. Mastodon, you got like 7 great albums right there. I'd be very happy with that. And I listen to them every day. So I'm not trying to be cool, Lindsey, because I said Prince would probably be like pick number 2. So I like Prince, but Mastodon it is.
Scott, please tell me that you didn't answer this question by naming 5 bands. Because Tadpole, I don't think Tadpole would publish all of that, Steve.
They would have to. I mean, it's college radio, baby. Come on. You got plenty of time.
I don't have to dissect. There's only one band that I know.
Oh.
They haven't driven me crazy in the almost 50 years I've been listening to them. That's King Crimson, all the way from 1969 and In the Court of the Crimson King.
Okay.
All the way up. It's all the albums, though. So all the live albums,
yep,
all
it's
the
a lot.
bootlegs. It would probably take me 10 years on a desert island to listen to everything that King Crimson put out. So for me, King Crimson.
Are you jealous that in October I'm going to go see King Crimson and they're performing their 1980s stuff with
Oh, remember, that's not King Crimson.
I know it's not
Steve
King
Vai.
Crimson, but that's the material that they're playing. They got Tony Levin. I think they got Fripp with them. I don't know. I'm excited to see it.
Steve Vai, Tony Levin, Danny Carey, I think,
Yes, from Tool.
is on drums. I can't remember if they have another guitar player or not. Yeah, I'm a little jealous of that. I would love to see Steve Vai pull that off. But
I'm not excited about Steve Vai. Get him out of there. But I'll go anyway.
What?
I don't care for his flashy bullshit.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Crossroads. We need to do Crossroads.
Hey man, Ralph Macchio wins every time, baby. Lindsey.
Hey, Lindsey, what's your
dying to hear yours now?
I'm not even going to ask.
Steve Vai played the devil's guitar player in the movie Crossroads.
And Ralph Macchio was in that movie?
Oh, yeah, he plays the hero. Yeah.
He wins.
And what's her name?
Wait, I've seen that scene.
Jamie Lee Gertz. All-time crush right there.
There you go. Let's get that to Desert Island pick, though.
Reference. It's all 7 degrees of Lost Boys, by the way.
All right. My desert island band is going to be Depeche Mode. I had to think about this a long time.
Nice.
I'm good with that.
But yeah, because I think you had a good point, Steve. Like, there's some bands you know so well, you could just sing them. You don't have to like have them playing. But yeah, this is a band that I got attached to in high school and then listened to pretty much the whole step of the way when I was in England on the trains system traveling. I never got sick of them, and they have such variety in their songs. So that's my pick for today. Maybe next year I would name something else, but that's it for today.
That's solid. I kind of guessed that that's what you would say. And I was kind of hoping that too, as a matter of fact, because I have all their albums. Well, I don't have all of them, but I have most of their albums up to about 2006. So that's a solid choice. And I was just thinking, who's Lindsey going to pick? I bet it's Depeche Mode. If it's not Depeche Mode, it's some band I've never heard of. So I hope it's Depeche Mode.
Okay. Any other topics you guys want to discuss before we close?
I have about 12 more pages of notes that I'd like to go over. I always have a lot more stuff to go over, but we're out of time. So I'm not going to do it. Maybe we'll get Nate for round 2, perhaps.
Well, okay. How about some plugs then? Do you want to plug anything, Scott? Where can people follow you and anything exciting coming up besides your new acquisition?
cleanandsoberstoner.com right now, and especially the YouTube channel. I've started a playlist on the YouTube channel.
Nice.
It's also a YouTube podcast. It's called Your New Favorite Band. and most of it are like literally brand new bands. Right now, the new band Clean is like my third most watched video in the entire history of the channel. It's caught on fire. I had them at like number 17 of my top 20 of May. They're now in like the top 5. I have to, because the people have spoken. I've got bands you've never heard of, and Ember, a band out of Richmond, gave me permission to put their own music video into this playlist. So cleanandsoberstoner.com. I've got interviews with Mike Scheidt from Yob, all sorts of new bands. So that's my plug right now, Clean and Sober Stoner on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Steve?
What I wanted to say about Yob, there's always something else. Who I'm going to King Crimson with is my friend Meg. And I took Meg with me to go see Yob, and she had never heard of Yob. And they got on stage, and, you know, the guy started playing. She's like, oh, he's kind of cute or whatever. What's up with this? And then he started singing, and she like just, her mouth was aghast, and she like just was in love with this guy from Yob. So it's just a weird tie-in that the same person that I saw Yob with, I'm also going to go see King Crimson with. She loves him. Anyway, my plugs are Lindsey's plugs. Me and Lindsey have been working together almost exclusively. So anything you hear from me, Lindsey's involved with. Our latest song may or may not be out at this point. It comes out June 20th. Called Thus the World is Created. I'm at sweetchildoftime.com. So I'd appreciate if you check out my website if you haven't already. Yeah, there you go, Lindsey. How about you? What are you plugging here on one of my stories?
Well, of course, I want to plug our song coming out, which was very exciting to put out an original song with you. I also wanted to plug that Steve has started a dark rewatch. So Tuesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, you can go to his Instagram, which is Introvoid, and find out where it's going to be this week.
Twitch.
Because I think there's...
I have a Twitch channel. My Twitch channel is also Sweet Child of Time. So it's like twitch.tv/Sweet Child of Time. And yep, every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, watching dark. Yeah,
all the way through. So that's a new thing we're doing that I think is exciting. And then starting this week for the next 10 days or so, I'll be covering the Tribeca Film Festival. Nice. So virtually, not going to New York. Not yet, but
dang it.
ready to watch some movies for that. And yeah, my channels are, of course, oneofmystories.com and at oneofmystories everywhere else. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. So good night to Scott and Steve and all the listeners.
Sweet dreams from Roanoke. Good night.
Thanks for having me on. Good night.
Sweet Child of Time is brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr helps us make Sweet Child of Time. When I schedule an episode, I send the link out to my co-hosts and whoever the guest may be. We all get in a room together, an online room, of course. We all record locally on our microphones, and when we're done, we all have individual files we can download for easy editing. You can either record video or audio. If you'd like to choose Zencastr, go to zencastr.com/pricing. Use the promo code SweetChildOfTime for 30% off any paid Zencastr plan. If you want to have the same easy experience I've had with podcasting, choose Zencastr. It's time to share your story.